Hey Graham, thank you for being here and thanks for being our literal last lecture from this week. You talked a lot about being a new dad, being a husband, and all of this happening while you were building your company. Can you talk a little bit about what it meant for you to be a partner and a parent a bit more?
I made a decision that, that being a dad was really important to me. And so I had basically three priorities. I had my business I had just started, I had my family, and then, work, health, exercise, and working out. And I kind of drew a line there, and there wasn't a lot more that I did during that time. Um, I also think that just like I was talking about on Wall Street, just so many of the things that you actually spend time on are a complete waste of time. And I would argue that maybe 80% of the things you do are a waste of time. So I got a lot better at just being ruthless with my calendar and trying to eliminate the things that I really didn't need to be done at all. For example, I think that I don't have these exact statistics, but I would guess that around we probably had a close rate of on deals around 75%. So we just didn't spend a lot of time on things that were not a good use of time. I don't know how else to say it. So that was, I think it just forced a prioritization. But I didn't take work dinners. I was home almost every night for dinner when I was in town. And look, certainly there's going to be events you miss, and there's times when you have to have trade offs. But I think just knowing really clearly what your priorities are, and then being ruthless with your calendar. Yeah.
Thank you so much, good day talk. What are specifically when design and learnable games? What are like tech tips or tactics for like finding our designing our own level game in our own space?
So the question was, what are the tactics for designing your own winnable game? So I gave you some questions to do that. But if I had to give you one thing to take away about how to design your own winnable game, it would be this. It would be, imagine that you have 100 units of energy that you can devote to anything, whatever that is. Just think of spending 10 to 15 of those units on the game itself, and then 85 to 90 playing the game. So what that looks like for us is we actually spend probably, for myself, I mean, I probably spend 4 or 5 hours a week on the game itself. Like, what does that look like? It looks like asking questions to which you don't, simple things like, hey, how would we, if we wanted to see every software company that was for sale in the United States, what would that look like? That would be an example of us designing a winnable game. But we're not in it. We're not looking at deals, working on companies, serving on boards. We're stepping above the game. And if you could spend like 10 to even 20% of your time doing that, that's where you're going to start to unearth all these opportunities. And that takes a ton of discipline. If you're managing a team, you have to give your team permission to do that, which most managers don't do.
Hi, Graham. My name is Andrew, and I didn't have the chance to take your class, but as you transitioned throughout your career from an individual contributor to someone who oversaw many people, what have you learned about how to support others? So, either as a parent or as a manager or a leader, it's difficult sometimes to support people who are going through something that you haven't experienced. So, what advice would you give us all as we go out into the real world on this?
I mean, I think I'll give you my algorithm for thinking about how to lead or how to manage somebody, and that is to be super clear on what the end goal is, and then give away as much of the decision rights and empowerment to getting those goals as possible. So an example of this might be at Alpine. Let's say you work on our sourcing team, and you are 25 years old. You can go out, you can spend money, you can go to conferences, you can go meet, talk to owners on the phone, you can do all kinds of things. And then if you're going to submit a letter of intent, you have very clear, it's a decision right you don't have, and you know exactly what that is as well, and you know where to get it. So I guess the idea of that's kind of the mechanics of how to manage someone. I think bigger picture, I think everybody that you manage wants to have a career path that they're excited about going down, and they typically need to see about 3 years out and see a path that they're really excited about for about 3 years. At least at Alpine, that's not the same path for everybody. It's kind of like hand-to-hand combat. Like every single person at Alpine has a slightly different career path that they're excited about. And so I think just recognizing that and being able to like make those careers come true for people, I think it takes a lot of work, but I think that's probably the most important thing that we do at Alpine. Yes.
Thank you, Graham. I've heard a theory of happiness that desire is kind of at the root of all unhappiness. Why is winning important?
The question was, desire is at the root of all unhappiness, and why is winning important? So I could actually talk for a fair amount on this topic. I do think that there is a path that I could have come up here and talked about, which is to go to an ashram and count your breaths and realize that you actually don't need anything to be happy, and it's all inside of you, and you could skip the whole game entirely and just find happiness within. And I think that's totally true. The problem is I'm talking to people from Stanford Business School who just paid a lot of money to win the external game and to have some sort of material success. And I actually thought about that, and I was like, you know what? I think I kind of have to merge the two. I'm going to have to talk about how to have the fulfilling part of your life and also have external success, because I probably wouldn't be invited back if I just went straight to the ashram. But you are right that you can skip the whole process if you have that kind of courage and go straight to internal happiness, because ultimately, whatever external success you're trying to get really just is another form of you reaching internal happiness. Maybe I could have made that more clear, but thanks for clarifying the question. Yeah.
Graham, thank you for the step-by-step guide today. My question is about step 5, which you plan your game, but life also happens, right?
Yeah.
Not everything is under your control. I'm curious, how often do you rethink your goals, rethink your North Star? Is there a step 5?
All the time. I mean, I probably talk to 2 to 3 coaches a week. We do all kinds of different planning exercise at Alpine. I mean, it's a compass that you have to kind of continually course correct and move. And I think some of the really core things, like if you look back at Alpine, we have 3 objectives: be the #1 performing fund in the world, be the best place to work for the best people, and be a force for good. I would hope that when I'm well gone, 50 years from now, those are still the 3 North Stars of Alpine. However, within that and how we do that, those things, we course correct all the time. And so there's a little bit, it kind of depends on what you're talking about as your North Star. I think there's some North Stars, for me, being a great parent, that's going to always be a North Star. Acting with integrity is going to be a North Star. And then there's a lot of sub goals and things that I think you're constantly iterating through. So I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
Hi, Graham. I'm David, and I didn't take your course. I wish I had. I've enjoyed every minute.
Thank you.
My question is this. Now that you've established the game, now that you're playing the game, what are you looking for in team members to join in that game? And what kind of questions might you be asking somebody who is a candidate to join you in your game?
Great question. So I'll give you a funny anecdote about this. So I first started a private equity firm, and of course I'm going to say, well, the first people I'm going to hire are people who worked at private equity funds. So we bring in a bunch of those people, and within like a couple months, all of a sudden we were recreating the exact culture that I had just left. We had just imported it to Alpine. So, with a lot of grace and generosity, we moved on from those people. And for the next 15 years, we never hired anybody who'd ever worked in finance or private equity or a hedge fund or investment banking. That's nothing against people who have done that. We just were like terrified of them bringing that culture to us. So kind of a little bit of maybe a different take, but that's a true story. So said differently, a more succinct way to say it is, we're looking for attributes over experience. We're looking for who someone is way more than what they've done in the past. And we found that to be a lot more correlated with long-term success, as you might expect. But you have to have a little bit of patience, because if you're hiring someone that doesn't have experience, then you have to be able to train those people to have that experience. In terms of the attributes that we're looking for, I'd say the #1 attribute is a will to win, like a white-hot desire to win, because that's something that we can't teach. People either have that or they don't. And then we're looking for kind of an alignment in values, which I talked a little bit about during the talk. And then there's other things that would probably come after that, for the role.
Hey, Graham. I didn't have the pleasure of taking your class, but excited to ask you this question. How did you discover your values? And along the way, did you ever adjust them? What made you adjust them if you did?
It's a good question. Do you want my personal ones or for the Alpine ones? Mine? I don't know how I discovered them. I mean, if I think about some of the ones about, being a parent, I think it was mostly when, how I wanted, I don't know, I thought a little bit about how I wanted to show up for my kids, and I thought way ahead, and if I look back, what would I be proud of, and what would I feel good about? And I guess that was where that value came from. I think one of my other values is probably just whatever I'm doing to throw myself in head first and try to do 1000% of my soul into that thing. And I found that value probably by trying that and realizing that was when I lit up, and that's when I've been the best version of myself. So I don't have a great simple answer for how I found them. I think they've all come different ways. Like, just to give you an idea, for every time I do a talk, a last lecture, I start with a blank piece of paper. I have no idea what I'm going to say. I try not to repeat things from year to year. And I bet this took 3 months, and I have, I think, probably 15 different hours of me, actually giving the speech that I recorded and tried again. And so I don't know. That's been one of my values, is just try to, like, whatever it is that is in front of me, try to, throw myself into it as much as I can. Maybe just pay attention to your intuition and what feels right.
Hi, Graham. Also have not had the pleasure of taking your class. Quick question. What does the word enough mean to you right now, and how's that evolved over time?
That's a great question. I think you go through this arc, and at the beginning of the arc, you're in, like, survival, and you're literally you're literally trying to pay the mortgage, feed the kids, put the kids through college. And, like, that's what enough is in the early stages. You probably then set some other goals. Enough is, for us, maybe staying in business for a certain period of time. And I do think you get to a point where you have to come up with different objectives, because this like survival instinct is I think will get you so far, but it ultimately is not gonna not gonna be the thing that's driving you anymore. And so I think there's a much more higher level, more creative, more energetic place you can be coming from, which is like, why do I want to do this? Okay, like, just like I said to you all, like, if you knew you weren't going to fail, what would you do? And I think when you're coming at that from a place of already feeling enough, it's so much more fun, and you have so many more degrees of freedom. I'll be totally honest, like, that didn't happen for me for a very long time. I think I came at a lot of my life for a very long time of not being enough and needing to prove stuff ultimately to myself. And I've done a lot of work spiritually to let go of that. And I'm not saying I have entirely, but I've moved a long way on that journey. And the great thing is you can actually get there anywhere where you are. I don't think you have to achieve a certain amount to get there. I think it's more of it's just a mindset. I mean, I have colleagues of mine that I graduated from business school who make more money than they will ever spend, and they don't have enough, and I don't think they ever will. So I think it's a good investment of your energy to, do whatever that practice is for you to kind of, like, try to feel enough within yourself. And it's one of the best investments I've made. And that looks like, therapy and spirituality and meditating and coaching and all kinds of things.
Hello, Graham. My name is Mark. I was really interested in your quote, "You will have a higher probability of achieving an inspirational goal than you will have of achieving a more modest goal."
Yeah.
I'd love for you to maybe explain how you came to that realization, and also why you think that is true.
I think for a long time in my life, I never really put myself out there. I always had an excuse ready. I had a reason why it wasn't going to work that was ready, that I could give, and I could give it to myself or to someone else. It's almost like a defense mechanism of, like, here's why I failed. And then there's a couple times in my life, and rowing was one of them, I've had a couple other times, a number of other times in my life where I just don't give myself that out, and um, it's just an entirely different feeling when you throw yourself in with 1,000% and you're unhedged and you're fully committed. It's just a it's magical. Like you tap into this kind of source of energy and commitment that you can't get otherwise. And I had the good fortune of doing that a couple times early in my life, and it didn't mean I got the outcome that I wanted, but I knew I was going to keep going with it, and I got to feel what that felt like to just be fully all in, and it's the best feeling in the world. And so I that's kind of what I mean by you'll have a higher probability. And not to sound cliche, but like you don't have to actually hit the goal. Like if we hit 4x or 4.3x, or if I didn't hit the goal of being an Olympian, and like you don't have to hit the goal. It's not about that. It's about like who you get to be while you're showing up and going after that goal. Like that's the real magic.
Hi, Drew. I have a question about interviewing. So I feel like here we've been told there is a possibility of having our first career, but also a second, third career. And you're at a stage in life now where that optionality is open to you. So I'm curious if you think about it iteratively, if you have any advice for people who are kind of think about it iteratively.
Yeah. So the question I don't know if you could hear was, can you have multiple careers and can you iterate through different careers? I mean, I think of definitely, absolutely. I think that you want to be really careful in how you think about this. Like, I think I think there are some careers at some periods where if you're not completely all in, like they will fail. Like if in the early stages, and I would say early stages meaning like 14, 15 years of Alpine, I felt like if I was trying to do a second career or do, 3 more things, like it was so fragile, I think it could have fallen apart. And so I don't think I think the right answer for me for a period of time was to just be locked in on that. And then I think as it got a little bit more stable, I started realizing some other things I had a lot of energy for, like teaching here, and I just sort of followed that energy, and it led me to, I paid attention to that energy and said, hey, when I was a case guest in Irv Grossbeck's class for 12 years, and I was like, this is one of my favorite days of the year is when I got to come down and be with all of you, and so I just kind of followed that and then started teaching here. But I think so 100% you can have different careers, and you could, then you could be a writer, an author, or some, all kinds of other things. But I think you want to be careful not to be spread too thin in the early parts, because it can be pretty fragile in the early days. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Thanks. Thank you.